Welcome to Innovation in Government. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Srinivas Kosaraju, the Senior Director of Public Sector at Tableau. Srinivas, welcome to the discussion.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me today.
Let me set some context for our conversation today. When it comes down to it, the coronavirus pandemic is a big data problem. And for agencies, that data is the fuel for making decisions about where to spend money, where to send personal protective equipment, and which citizens are in need of help. It's the basis of how many organizations are seeing and measuring the impact of the virus around the world. For instance, the Federal Trade Commission reported a record number of people moved their shopping online over the last few months, meaning the FTC received more complaints about packages not being delivered. Over at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, they're serving up data about deaths and COVID-19 cases in nursing homes. And the National Center for Health Statistics and the Census Bureau partnered to provide data about health access to healthcare through the Vital Statistics System. No surprise, data is everywhere and it's involved in almost every effort. There are dozens of agencies from the SBA to the IRS to FEMA providing more data than any one person or organization can ingest and make sense of. This is why agencies and really all organizations need help to make sense of all that data, especially as federal employees start to return to their offices. Agencies need to easily visualize the information, create dashboards so the public and senior leaders can understand what's going on and spot the trends as they developed. So for more on how agencies can use data to drive decisions, let's turn to my guest. Srinivas Kosaraju is the Senior Director of Public Sector at Tableau. I talked all about there's data everywhere. Data is the new oil. Use whatever adage you want these days. But really, agencies are trying to change, and that change is coming from that data. How has that pandemic really demonstrated this necessity more than ever before?
Well, I got to tell you, Jason, 4 months ago, 5 months ago now, as Tableau, as a company, started to see our customers across public sector starting to react to this virus coming out of Asia, and suddenly people are getting sick. Data became the key thing that was able to drive their response. We saw cities and states and local municipalities and federal government suddenly activating and creating data teams and bringing together collaboration across departments in ways that were never possible. During your opening, you talked about a number of different agencies and functions really that came together in pandemic response and have changed the way that they're doing business. And nearly everybody that you mentioned, frankly, are customers of Tableau, right? And whether they're customers of us or other players in the analytics space, they're realizing that with data, Jason, they can provide their citizens and their stakeholders the information, the transparency, the trust that they're really looking for during a very unsure time in the nation and the world.
The key word here, I think, is trust and transparency. And I think that's kind of what we're getting to here. If an agency can provide this data, then change can happen. Is that what you're starting to see when you talk to your agency customers? That's a key theme that they bring up, or you bring up to them, or vice versa, or all together?
Well, I'd say that, as a provider of technology in this space, we always talk about trust, and it's a core value here at Tableau and also at Salesforce. But, it was our customers really during the early phases of the pandemic that spoke a lot about trust. Our customers were saying, listen, we don't know where we need to send our ambulances. We don't know where to send our PPE. We don't know if there are outbreaks occurring. Our citizens don't know. How do we, take care of our essential workers, whether they're medical staff or people delivering supplies? It was all information that created both trust from the citizenry and their government that they were reacting, and then within the government, trust that they could provide those services in a timely manner and really take care of people and save lives. So I would say it was really pushed from our customers during this time.
The trust piece is something we talk a lot about. Part of that need for trust is understanding where that data is, where it lives, how to find it. Did agencies and other organizations, as they kind of took on this public health crisis, how did they kind of ensure they had the right data? How do they ensure they're collecting it and then processing and analyze it? Walk me through maybe some of the use cases or examples that you've seen about agencies who've done this well.
Sure, yeah. So Jason, this was a really fast-moving situation and very dynamic, right? I know that you've spoken to a lot of information technology leaders across the government, and you hear people always talking about, we want to be agile, we want to be reactive, we want to be able to move quickly. Well, this was really a chance where our customers did that, and they did it in a couple of different ways, right? you as a user of data, you need to have the tools in your agency that allow people with domain knowledge to self-serve. That was really key during this time, because what we found was, agencies talk a lot about data-driven decision-making. And frankly, when somebody who's working in an agency for 15 years or 20 years or 25 years hears somebody say, hey, we're going to do data-driven decision-making, their first thought is, well, what do you think we've been doing all these years? All right. So what we found during the pandemic is by deploying tools that allowed people to grab data from the enterprise, grab what a lot of people call dark data, or just data from the desktop or spreadsheets that are being sent around, being able to bring those together, visualize them, and then share those visuals, either through the web, through a centralized server, any way possible. It was that collaboration of information across various agencies and departments that was critical to managing that response.
You bring up an interesting point, the collaboration and coordination among agencies. And one of the examples I brought up was, the National Institutes of Health and the Census Bureau really looking at where is their access to healthcare. And we're seeing a lot of that collaboration. And data is key to that. It's not just a systems issue or a tool issue, but hey, can we use your data? Can we share data? Can we go to the same place for data? Has that been also a big driver that you've seen of agencies really doing more than ever before, or understanding the value of sharing the data in new ways, different because of the pandemic?
Well, Jason, what happened during the pandemic is people realized that some of the artificial barriers that were creating data silos within organizations were unnecessary. So one of the cities that we worked with, their Department of Health and Mental Health had been a customer, their fire department had been a customer, their emergency management department had been customers. But they had never collaborated. They didn't have a single place that they could share information. They didn't have a single place that they could improve each other's data. They didn't have a way to join their data set. They'd always been operating independently because that was the policy. Suddenly, because they needed information, they were able to sort of push through that red tape, set up a collaboration server, and in retrospect, they were able to realize that they didn't increase risk. There was no downside to collaborating and sharing information because they had the proper policies in place to support that. So it's really been, Jason, a matter of people seeing that now in the pandemic, because data, as you said, is the new oil, getting to it as quickly as possible, refining it and getting it to the filling stations is the key. And people were willing, agencies and governments were willing to change their operating procedures. During the pandemic, agencies all of a sudden who had transparency initiatives or open data portals that they had set up to meet the letter of the law realized suddenly that these were tools that our citizens want. Right? Our citizens live in social media. They live on YouTube and Hulu and Netflix and Disney Plus. The experience that they're seeing is a very visual and graphic experience in their commercial and personal lives. They're expecting the user experience and the customer experience with government systems to be the same and at the same speed. So the expectation of many years ago that you and I probably remember more than others, of doing business through the mail or waiting in line, those days are gone, and the pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation.
Yes, my colleagues mocked me the other day when I said I mailed my tax bill back to the IRS. They all looked at me like, you mailed something? I said, yes. One of the things you bring up here, and I think this is key, is the proper policies, the proper ability to share and collaborate. And I think that's one thing that's going to be key as we continue to kind of work in this coronavirus pandemic environment. Agencies are starting to return to the office, at least some employees are. How is that ability to share data, whether it's from the physical security folks and the IT folks, or whether it's just office by office, key to really an effective return strategy?
Well, you've actually sort of said it, Jason. The ability to share information from the different systems and groups that interact with your employees will give them the trust that you're providing a safe place for them to come back, to deliver their agency's mission, to be able to deliver those services. We have a large agency that has sites, locations nationwide, coast to coast, service centers that people can come into. What they're doing is they've published a map coast to coast that lists the people at each station, the missions at each station, the hours that are available. Each station is then seen in context. What's the current infection rate for that county? What's the 7-day projection? What's the 1-month projection? So they're really taking a sort of a fact-based approach, using data to really safely reopen and bring employees. You know, they've been working throughout the pandemic, but trying to bring them back to the locations and move some of the interactions from virtual back to physical.
Are more agencies starting to ask Tableau and others about how to get them become more proactive in their decision making, and proactive in understanding what the data is telling them, so they can then plan better, have a better strategy?
Absolutely. You know, as you probably know, over the last 5 years or so, the data scientist is probably the hottest role being hired now by government agencies. What they're discovering, though, given the volume of big data, the 1 data scientist, the 2 data scientists, the 5 data scientists that they're able to hire aren't enough. So what agencies need to do is they need to think of what's their AI strategy and what's their BI strategy, and how do those two things work together. The idea really should be that your visualization strategy should allow you to take the work of your data science shops, your predictors and prioritizers, as it were, and then move that into your visual interface so that your functional people, your domain experts, can leverage those predictions and prioritization. And what's happening, Jason, is people are trying to say, look, there's so much going on, there's so much data, the needs of government are growing, especially in the time of the pandemic. The government is an all-time, post-World War II low in terms of its relative size to population. So government agencies are really trying to say, how can I use visualization, analytics, AI, and ML to move from a man in the loop to a man on the loop, or a woman on the loop posture, so that some of the automated transactions can take place, and then we can look for the anomalies or the areas that require human intervention without using, sort of that crude 5%, 10%. I think the days of the peanut butter spread, quote unquote, are over, right? As an agency leader, if you see any of your people saying, hey, I think we should do 10% across the board or 15 across the board, that should just be an indicator for you that somebody hasn't done their homework to understand what the real pain points or what the real, good things that you're doing are.
I really do like instead of being on the loop, in the loop, being on the loop. So we're going to probably address that in our next segment. So let's take a quick break. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carahsoft on Federal News Network.